All right, introduce yourself.
I'm Chase. I'm going to be the live audience.
I want you to think about a time where you failed a school assignment. How did you feel about failing? How did your parents feel about you failing? How did you feel about going back to class the next day? Did your friends make fun of you? For many children, that happens on a daily basis. And today, I'm going to talk to you about the impact of internet access on education and why we need to increase internet access to children across the country. Technological developments over the last several decades have made the internet and mobile computing cheaper and more accessible. While regular internet access may seem like a regularity in today's world, internet access is disproportionately unavailable to lower income families, families living in rural areas, and minorities. This has been repeatedly studied by academic institutions, published by professors, and reported on in the media. A separate study done in 2005 showed that personal digital assistance, or PDA, use in schools raised grade point averages by up to 13%. At the time, PDAs were a more cost-effective method than a laptop. Laptop computing had not been brought to the forefront of technology. They were generally too large, too inexpensive, and required a wired connection to access the internet. Between 1994 and 2007, internet access in schools increased from 3% to 95%, but did not have enough bandwidth to meet needs. So what you had was an inability to get cheap devices into a classroom and then a lack of internet access. Today, we have these. This phone is essentially a small laptop. It is about 200 times more powerful than the PDAs back in 2005, and provides the ability to access the internet almost anywhere, as long as I can get cell service. So let's talk about the negative effects of increased internet access. First and foremost, there's a privacy issue. As the internet has grown and as our access to information on the internet has grown, other people's access to us has also increased. Generally now, you'll find cookies and trackers on websites, and so when you visit a website or you go to access information, the webmaster for that domain can actually see you doing it. And so that creates concerns for parents about what sites their children are going to visit. Additionally, the internet has a ton of messaging apps, a ton of video and media-based platforms, and those can be distracting. Kids can spend time watching YouTube videos about Minecraft, texting their friends, browsing Facebook, and so too much internet access can be a bad thing. And then the third point is going to be that individuals that don't have a basis or a technological education are not going to be able to benefit from this because they don't know how to use the technology to help them increase the quality of their education. Okay, so we talked about the increase in the internet access between 1994 and 2007. But what does it look like today? Well, in 2021, Harvard University decided to look at the internet access post-COVID to determine what the effects that COVID had on internet access for children. And they looked at the 2019 FCC Broadband Deployment Report. And that stated that 14.5 million Americans lived in areas without access to high-speed internet. The problem with that report is that it was based on ISP's self-reporting, right? So an internet service provider self-reporting. And so when they went back and looked at the data, what they really found was that about 42 million Americans did not have access to high-speed internet where they lived. And for reference, that's just under 20% of the American population. So let's talk about what expanding internet access would actually do now. A 2020 study done by 4 professors from differing international universities suggested that balancing multimedia and cloud computing with focused content in a lesson plan could contribute up to 30% retention and recognition of information. Additionally, increasing internet access provides flexibility in instructional methods. So whether you have another pandemic, there's a severe thunderstorm, there's a tornado, whatever the case may be, students have access to their classroom, they have access to their information, and they have access to an education. So while the federal government did provide some assistance to families and school districts to help recover from the impacts of COVID, the emphasis on increasing internet access to those families has since dwindled. In an increasingly digital age, the gap in education quality between those that have internet access and those that do not is rapidly expanding. Access to a quality education shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a human right. Writing your senators and representatives and requesting social programs intended to provide increased internet access to children is a cheap and cost-effective method to get things done. I hope you guys can see the value in doing so, not just for our sake, but for our children's sake. Thank you for listening, and I will now stand by for questions.
Do you think that increasing internet access, could there be a decline in social skills among the youth?
So that's definitely a concern. Removing children from a social situation like a classroom doesn't allow for those normal social interactions. So you do sometimes see that social isolation. And so that's why the blend of focused content and multimedia is so effective, because it promotes that societal, communal group behavior that you get in a classroom and augments it with relatable content that the teacher doesn't necessarily have to come up with on their own, but is out there and available as a tool. So it is definitely a concern. You just have to strike the right balance.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time. That's all I have.